Good morning. My name is Caroline Kotze. I'm the president and founder of Women in Governance, a nonprofit organization based out of Montreal, and delighted to be here today. This is my fourth experience with the Women's Forum. I've done Deauville, Paris, Mexico City, and delighted that finally we have a Women's Forum in Canada. So let's make it an amazing experience for everyone so that they decide to come back year after year, and maybe in Quebec, who knows. I'd like to introduce our distinguished panelists here today. We have Sapna Mahajan, who's Director of Mental Health Communication Commission of Canada. Chiara Condi, President and founder of Led by Her. Anar Simpson, Global Ambassador for, I'm sorry, the lighting, and maybe I should put my glasses. For Technovation, Strategic Partnerships and Advisor for Tech Women. And Zahra Al-Harazi, co-founder of Elangogo. And finally, our front row commentator is Rhonda Barnett. She's president and CEO of Steelworks Design. So the name of our panel today is The New Skills Pipeline for an Inclusive Future of Work. I'll just give you a bit of a background if you haven't seen what it's about. As certain industries prepare to need fewer employees in the coming years, others report a lack of talented workers and skills shortage. Technology is driving many of these trends with impacts on populations differing by gender, race, and education levels. Women, for instance, are twice as likely as men to lose their jobs due to automation. As the competition for jobs increases due to technology's impacts, the stakes will be even higher to ensure gender diversity across industries and regions. Pipelines of female talent begin in how we approach early education and vocational training and extend through higher education to recruitment, retention, and mentoring programs. Creating inclusive workplaces will also need to account for technology's role in shaping how we work, from remote workforces to the increase of freelance jobs. So my first question to our panel is, where are the greatest opportunities to increase the number of women in pipelines for future talent? Sapna, would you like to start?
So I'll focus on mental health. In Canada, 500,000 people each week are not at work because of a mental health issue. And that attributes to 30% of our disability claims and 70% of disability costs. So it's actually costing our economy $51 billion a year. People absent from work because of a mental illness. And why I'm raising this in this context is when we look at the work environment changing, whether it's technology, AI, or even just a shrinking workforce, what's important? It's our brains. We're not in an industrial age. We're not using our hands. The greatest asset, the one that you want to foster, is the minds. And so I think we need to really think about mental health. I think the public and private sector need to take leadership and think of it as a workforce and talent strategy. And unfortunately, the reason I bring the mental health piece up is that women are more at risk. The numbers show that more women are leaving the workplace because of a mental health issue. So we need to look at resiliency. We need to look at how to support women. And the World Health Organization has now said that by 2020, mental illness will be, actually I think it's depression to be specific, will be the second leading cause of disease in the world. So as we look at these changes, which we know are inevitable, they're happening now, but they're going to happen faster, and they're going to have a greater impact in our workplace. We really need to think about how do we support the mental health, the resiliency of women.
Thank you. Thank you. What are your thoughts, Chiara?
Well, my thoughts are that getting more women into technology is really, really important. Getting more women into entrepreneurship is vital for our economy. And I think we have statistics that show that economies that are relying on existing and mature jobs, they face economic decline and chronic job loss. And in the US, the most net new jobs are being created by companies that have less than 5 years of existence. So I really think entrepreneurship is the future, and that not enough women are getting into those resources so that they can become the high growth, high potential businesses of tomorrow. And I think that that's going to be a huge factor for countries if they want to grow, because we are half of the world's population.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get into how we can make that happen in just a second. Anar, your thoughts?
Right, so I've been working with women, girls, and technology for the last 5 to 7 years. And my role is to ensure that more young girls start to get into tech careers at a very young age, and that women who sort of are already in tech careers stay, and then more at a global and national level, how to get more women, both in rural areas and urban areas, to participate in technology. And I think the one thing that has become really, really obvious in the last, I would say, 2 years, is that we need to focus on that. We need to make sure that women and girls get into existing structures. And when I say existing structures of tech, I'm talking about the big companies, the established companies of tech like GAFA, right? Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, right? These are the big ones. And what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we'll make sure that our young generation, our women, are capable and skilled to get into those structures. But what struck me recently is that those structures embody governance in those structures. And so forever, we're going to be fighting these glass ceilings, right, to get in there and to make a difference. And yes, we should do that. We should have tools to do that. We should continue that fight. But I think it's equally important that we look at another set of technologies that are emerging right now. And what I'm talking about are the Web 3.0 technologies, like blockchain, right? Like other foundational technologies. And I think instead of only having our gaze here with governance built in these, we should look at these ones, because governance is actually being built into these new blockchain type, AI type technologies. And the worst thing we can do is to miss the boat here, right? We don't want to do that. So that would be my perspective.
So now you're based in Silicon Valley, so we'll be able to get into more details of what's going on over there. Zara, your views.
So I think that the traditional education systems need to change. A lot of our kids go into university when they are quite young to make a big decision and graduate with a 4-year degree. And at the end of that 4-year degree, that skill may no longer be relevant. They may no longer want to be in that degree. Trust me, I have 3 children, 2 engineers, and a psychologist that are all working in fields that they didn't go to school for. And you learn subject matter in your field. You don't learn it across disciplines and learn different skills. And I really think those models need to change. We need to offer technology-enabled solutions that democratize the process for people, that allow skills to be learned in a different way, that are affordable and inclusive, and shorter time periods. And LinkedIn Learning and Coursera, and there's a lot of Skillshare, a lot of sites are doing that right now and changing the way we learn. They're not in person. We're finding 97% of people who sign up for an online course drop out even if they've paid for it. And so the new company that I'm building with a couple of incredible women is skills learning, but it's all in person. And I think the systems are going to have to change in order for us to compete.
Thank you. So our goal here is, of course, to come up with recommendations for the G7. If we look at mental health, for instance, Sapna, and we understand that there is going to be job losses due to increase of technology, artificial intelligence, etc. How can we work on people's resilience so that they can actually adapt to this, to respond to the skill shortage that we're going to see at the same time?
And I think it speaks to your point. It has to start how we educate. We have to look upstream. And there's been discussion all morning about all the way from vaccinations and access and health to the workplace. But I think in the workplace, and many of you in this room are leaders, is to obviously look at the future and the innovations, but look at your inside. And Canada actually has a homegrown, the first in the world solution. It's called a national standard for psychological health and safety in the workplace. It's like occupational health and safety standards, but it's for mental health. And organizations across Canada and the world have been using it, and it's really helping to build resiliency, safeguard people's, as I called, their brains, their minds, and maybe people trying to create kind of that mentally healthy workplace and wellness, and trying to keep more women at work so that when we are trying to move into leadership positions, they're in positions that most likely won't be lost. And we know that, I've read a stat somewhere that there's going to be a certain percent, I think 50% of jobs that are automated are going to be gone, and women unproportionately hold those more than any others. So we need to make sure that they're resilient and staying in the workplace, not burning out, so that they can take leadership roles and remain in the workplace.
Perfect. Chiara, what would be your recommendations to the G7 in terms of programs that can support more women entrepreneurs?
So I think why a lot of solutions to support women's entrepreneurship today are not working, and why we haven't seen a difference in the statistics, is that they're focused on one single aspect and they're not multi-stakeholder approaches. And the problem is that, for example, even if you do get a lot of women into STEM, that doesn't mean that they will become entrepreneurs in the sectors. For example, there is research that shows from the US that even if women get into STEM, if they have a child under 2, it decreases by half their chance of becoming an entrepreneur. And it has absolutely zero effect for men in the same situation. So it means that we have to take a more global approach. We have to look at the tax policy, double income tax policy, for example, fosters more entrepreneurship. We have to look at the maternity situation, the childcare situation. We have to create the environment that fosters women entrepreneurs so that they can actually exist in real life. And I think that we have to involve a lot of different actors in order to change that. And then there's another thing, which is that we have to create today more programs that are women only, because we see, and there are tons of statistics and studies that show that sort of accelerator, incubator structures and a lot of support structures that were created predominantly by men in culture and in recruitment are discriminatory, and they don't account for special needs of women. And so I think that we need to make a huge investment because women entrepreneurs are going to be a huge investment in the future of countries.
Good point. Anar, which innovative solutions do you see in Silicon Valley for preparing women and girls for these emerging technologies?
Sure. So Silicon Valley by no means has answers for everything. In fact, they are perpetrators of a lot of things.
Yes.
I want to
Yes.
put a caveat there. I do think, though, relating to your first question, you know, on the world stage, Canada has made a nice blip, right? The Canadian cabinet is 50% women, and that's governance, right? And it was done in a very thoughtful way. And I think the same thing can happen with technology, with emerging technologies. All of you are familiar with the word, or with the saying, software eats the world, yes? Software, 8-hour watch, 8-hour music, right? Lots of things, calendars, alarms, everything is now in our mobile phone. That's the idea of software eats the world. Everything is based on software. The interesting thing is that 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, the governance structure, software is now eating governance. So the governance structure is shifting. If the G7 countries really understand and embrace that, and I'm sure they do, they have tons of policy people who probably understand that, but that's a fundamental shift. If governance is moving to software, then we better ensure that everybody is part of that movement. Because if it's not, again, it'll be by the few people who go to cryptocurrency conferences or Bitcoin conferences, all these emerging tech, right? We don't want that. So, and what do I mean by governance is moving to tech? Let me give you a really quick example. All of you have heard of blockchain, right? Huge database, like a ledger, and it's read-only. So you write in there, and everything is, it's almost impossible, and I say almost, to make deceitful things on there, right? The governance is built into the blockchain in a way. Lots of things are going that way, not just for money, but also for contracts, for supply chains, you name it. So if the governance is being built in there, and it's open to everybody to participate, then I think one of the things that the countries can do is to ensure that they have pathways, that they integrate people into those structures.
Mm-hmm. Zara, in your opinion, how could we have funding opportunities for these projects, for development?
Funding opportunities for development. Well, right now, 4% of funding for startups goes to women, only 4%. Right, and that's pretty shocking. So women-led companies generate 50% more revenue with 20% more revenue with 50% less investment in them. And so I think there's lots of ways you increase funding for women-led businesses. Countries like Singapore are ahead of the game. They have a fund for lifelong learning for every single Singaporean above the age of 25. And so they put $500 in a fund to go towards upskilling and learning skills, and the government continues to top that up. Companies like Google do a 20% of your day where you just get to go and play. And that allows people, so a lot of the young Google employees are working on their own startups in that 20% of the day, right? So that gives them an opportunity to use resources and get ahead. And I really think that back to education, educators and private sector really need to work together to make sure that when our kids graduate, they graduate with the right set of skills that are going to help them get ahead in the world.
Great. Sapna, what are the roles of the public and private sector in terms of funding? Funding for these pipelines of women.
Could you explain more? I'm not sure exactly what you mean.
Well, we're talking about pipelines of female talent that are required to be able to address the shortage of talent that we're going to see with the increase of artificial intelligence and tech. What do you think the role of the private sector and the public sector in terms of funding the pipelines of female talent would be?
Well, one, and I think it was mentioned this morning in the panel, there's a role for both. And I think they're aligned, but you need both. And they play in different sides. And I think on the side of the public sector, I think someone this morning mentioned around there are public policies that need to be put into place that set the foundations to really enable a lot of this to happen. But you need to have private sector funding, leadership, buy-in, and real commitment. Because I find that there is a little bit of talk. And I was at a conference this week called Walk the Talk, because there is a lot of talking happening. Because at least in Canada, it's something that our Prime Minister, we're hearing it. And so people, are trying to emulate it and say it. But when you actually look at governance and look at funding, it doesn't reflect it in the private sector per se as yet. So I think it's something that needs to be hand in hand and working together, but I think we're still challenged in finding the right way forward.
Kara, your thoughts on that question?
Yes, so I think that there is a lot that needs to happen. I think that definitely the government needs to look at also what kind of structures they are funding that are helping entrepreneurs, and seeing what the statistics are and demanding statistics of those structures to see if they are actually benefiting women. So I think that that's really important. I think that there need to be more sort of entrepreneurship support plans that go from pre-startup to startup to business development stage and cover all of that so that you don't lose women along the way. I think that the private, that we have venture capital and angel investing that is going to women at a much lower rate than men.
Right.
That has to do a lot with statistics. And from what I have seen in interviewing venture capitalists and angel investors, it's also that the gender stereotypes, unfortunately, are ingrained in us.
Yes.
So one, venture capitalists are asking women different questions than men and setting them up for sort of failure. And another thing is that women are asking a lot less than men. And, I had spoke with one angel investor who said, okay, a man, if he doesn't get the money, he doesn't care. He's just going to ask me, well, can you connect me to your university so I can sell them my product? And women just won't do that. So I think that we have to work a lot more holistically on changing culture and also how women see themselves and promoting that from, as I've said, from a very, 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 very early stage, because that's where we can really change things. And then also working with maybe women who are in the beginning stages of entrepreneurship so that we can affect things and get them into creating the high growth businesses that they want to create, and that we don't lose them along the way because the structures that we have in place are not adapted for them.
Now, these interviews that you've conducted with angel investors, do they realize the bias that they're prone to, or do they think it's normal?
Yeah, so I spoke both with researchers who studied this, notably at Columbia, and then also with angel investors and VCs. And there is an awareness that it is human, that we want to promote people who look like us. So our instinct and the instinct of a VC will be, if somebody comes in, they see them, oh, that was me 20 years ago, and who are a lot of VCs, people who went to Harvard, Stanford, et cetera, and are white and male, and then they see the young guy who comes in who looks like they did 20 years ago, and they said, there I am. And the natural instinct of a human being is to promote that, because we are risk averse. A woman comes in, what happens? She's different. We have certain stereotypes about women. We will ask them certain questions in certain ways, and we think that they are, that they will not take risk on well, et cetera. So we project all these things. And once the woman comes in, she faces a much huger challenge in overcoming all these stereotypes in order to get that funding. And that makes it twice as difficult. And when I did interviews with women entrepreneurs, actually what they said was the biggest challenge was credibility. That when a man says, I'm an entrepreneur, I offer this, we take it at face value. A woman, she has to prove herself. And that makes it twice as challenging. So I think we have to change all these things, and I think that that's also where maybe government and policy and countries can do things, because we can change through media, through campaigns, also the way we envision or that we visualize certain roles, and hopefully that will change in the future as more and more women entrepreneurs are being created. But there is an awareness of the discrimination, and that will also change maybe as we get more VCs and angel investors who are women, and I think that has already changed in the angel community a lot, and maybe not so much in the VC community.
Anar, in Silicon Valley, you were saying earlier that actually they are perpetrators of these issues. I was reading something about the Google co-founders who themselves were sons of very powerful women, very businesswomen who had done a lot in STEM notably, and they thought they were so far from sexism that they didn't pay attention to what was going on. At least this is what they're explaining in terms of why all of a sudden they were surrounded by mainly men. I believe there is an effort that's being put right now, Facebook, Yahoo, Google, etc. What do you see that they're doing concretely to change things? I was reading this book by Joanne Lipman, that's what she said, where she's describing going into, I can't remember if it was Facebook or Google, but everywhere were Star Wars posters, and there were rooms where, it looked like a little boys' room, there were PlayStations, etc. And she was wondering how would they feel if it was the other way around and they'd go in and it's all Barbie dolls, would they be comfortable? So what are they doing concretely to change that?
Great question, and I hate to point fingers at anybody, but I just want to make sure the message I get across is Silicon Valley. I love Silicon Valley, and I actually believe that technology is going to make the human race actually evolve to a better state. But that doesn't mean we haven't made mistakes. And then just to get back to the big question and then to your specific question. Look, it's really hard to change culture. We all know that, right? It's behavior. And the hardest thing to change about anybody, you, me, is behavior. It's super hard. And then you're talking about behavior in a competitive landscape, right? Silicon Valley and every other company has shareholders that they're going to have to appease to. That's money. That's the bottom line, right? And so to change behavior without saying, oh, the bottom line's going to change at all, right? You got to keep that huge picture in mind. But the good news is, yes, people are aware of this. We have shown a spotlight on this. It is wrong to say that women can't be amazing coders, amazing tech people, amazing everything. It's wrong. And that realization is getting there. But to change it, again, in those existing structures that have existing power in them, that are autocracies, that are run by men, okay, well, that behavior is going to take a long time, right? But it is happening. And thank you for saying that, yeah, we have to get to girls to say, look at us, we are tech people, and you can be tech people, right? So we're getting to them. So I'll give a plug to Technovation. Young girls from around over 100 countries now take part in Technovation, which is just telling them, look around you. If you see a problem in your community, whether it's in Armenia or Zimbabwe, and these are the countries we're in, you think there's a problem you can solve using a mobile app, we will teach you how to make the mobile app. On top of that, we'll teach you how to be a tech entrepreneur, just the basics, right? And then what we're doing is we're giving them power to say, I can change something in my community. And if you get a chance, go to YouTube, look for a Technovation pitch. You will be amazed at the change in the culture that these girls are talking about. They're powerful. They're the young sort of founders of tomorrow. So I think it's there. And then to go back to your real pointed questions, the government can do funding, and they can say the right things, and they could put enough women in the same powers. But here's a really concrete example that governments at all levels need to think about. The elephant in the room today is, say, AVS, autonomous vehicles, right? Self-driving cars are going to change the transportation industry, like completely change it. It's going to affect everybody. The people who live in the cities, right? The municipal level, right? The provincial level, and the federal level. Massive changes. Do we really want Waymo, which is Google's arm of driverless cars, or GM or Chrysler to make these decisions for us? Do we really? Seriously? I mean, this is our city. This is our land. These are our parking spots. So what I'm saying is what the governments at those levels should do is to say, okay, well, if Uber is in Calgary or in Toronto, where is the committee that's saying, okay, how is Uber going to operate? Where is the data going that Uber is collecting and Google is collecting and all these other people are collecting? Where is it going? Can it be shared? What's the revenue share? Where are the women's voices? Where are everybody's voices, not just women, right? Every constituent. And can we make sure when we go to the AVS world that what comes out has been shaped by, that has input from all of us? And that's a government thing without them opening their pockets or finding money. That's a government thing to say, Waymo, Uber, whatever, Lyft, in our city, this is sort of the input that we would like to give you before you go too far, so that when that is all in place, it's not just shaped by companies, it's not just shaped by men, it's shaped by people who live here and people who are going to be affected by it. Mm-hmm. So just one example on that.
Very good. Zara, your opinion on the role of public and private sectors?
In what sense?
Their role in funding projects? Whether government or private sector, how would they be able to support these changes?
Are we talking about skills pipeline?
Yes, yes.
So just back to what you were saying, I do agree with you. However, it is such a muddy area to wade into to get governments who are policymakers who don't understand business to then tell business people what to do, right? And so trying to find the balance between that, I think, is a very probably difficult place to be. But did anybody watch the Google CEO and the AI that booked a hair appointment yesterday? It was fascinating. I was not able at all, because she said, and I was not able to tell that she wasn't a real person. And what's scary about that is a lot of those jobs, the admin jobs and the truck drivers and, a lot of the frontline jobs that are going to disappear are women mainly jobs, and women are more at risk at losing work more than men do. And the gig economy is here, and it's here to stay. And freelance jobs are going to increase. And millennials are, my business partner is a millennial, and she drives me up the wall half the time. And I love how smart and agile she is. So trying to figure out how you work with other genders, how you work with other generations, how you work within your organizations, that there's a lot of shift that needs to happen. I don't think the private or the public sector is equipped and ready and prepared and able to take that on right now. So,
Well, AI being input and then output, do we feel that with a single gender working mainly on the input, is there going to be an impact on women with an output that's going to be very gender biased?
I'd like to
Go for it.
Yeah, for sure. All the data sets right now are biased, all of them, right? The bias is built into those data sets. So if we don't take efforts to contribute and integrate those, we will continue to be using those. And then I just want to go back to the question, is Silicon Valley doing anything to get away from, like offices that look like pool holes, right? A pool table. I don't even know, what are those things that you play?
Foosball.
foosball.
Thank you, foosball. I learned how to play foosball, but seriously, I learned it just because I had to. It's not something I would have done normally. So are they changing from this? And I think the answer is yes. Last year, everybody probably heard this, it was in the news, there was a memo, right? The Damore memo at Google, where a Google employee wrote a memo saying basically that women were not as competent as men developers at Google. And then Google had this huge furor over it. And it's funny how karma works. So the Google CEO is Sundar Pichai, and he was going to talk to all these employees to quell that and certainly make sure that women didn't feel like they weren't wanted at Google, which is massive, right? Employs a lot of people. And it turned out for security reasons he couldn't do it at Google, but we were holding the Technovation pitch event that Thursday at the Google headquarters, just outside. They had sponsored it for us. So he came to our event, and he talked to young girls all over the world because it was live streamed, and he told them all, I have a message for you, which is girls and women are needed in tech. They're needed in the tech world, they're needed at Google, and we will be behind you every step of the way. And all the media came with him, and so there was a big sort of, again, spotlight that yes, Google is going to be very, very attuned to the fact that women are needed in this space. And now we just have to see what actions have been taken to ensure that that's being done, right? So I mean, I think in outward senses, yes, there are. And then we have to look at maybe is Google going to release their wage gaps between the two, right? So I mean, he said something, and has he followed through? And I think we need to make sure that the spotlight follows them all the way through, so that we actually see results coming all the way through.
An open question to all of you. Are there best practices globally that you've witnessed that you think would be great recommendations for the G7?
Well, I wanted to say that I think it was in 2010 when Canada and the G7 actually brought maternal, newborn and child health. And then there was $5 billion spent in that. And in 2013, the UK did this for Alzheimer's. And I really think for this G7, putting mental health on the agenda is, and there are some best practices around the world on just creating a safe space for women to work. And I think everything that everybody has talked about, even though it's not explicitly mental health, it is implicitly. We need to be thinking about this. We're about to change drastically, no matter what the outputs are or the inputs. If we are eliminating half our workforce and everyone's burning out and depression's higher, we're not going to be able to do anything. And so I think everything kind of implicitly, I think explicitly, we need to discuss mental health of women, but of people in the workplace as we move to this kind of new, scary and exciting place.
And I really think that soft skill development adds to that mental health answer, because the soft skills like communication skills and flexibility and adaptability and resilience and all those things that a lot of the kids coming out of school today are not equipped with. They are not learning those things in school. And the educators are like, that's not what we're supposed to teach them. We're here to teach them engineering and medicine and whatever else it is. And businesses are saying, well, they're not ready. We have 8 entry-level unfilled jobs with our companies that we can't fill because we can't find right candidates. And how is that possible in today's world when we have people looking for work and we have jobs that can't be filled? And so there definitely is a gap, and that whole learning those soft skills are what is going to make people stronger and more resilient and better able to handle the mental health challenges and stresses of the workplace.
Chiara, last comment before we go to Q&A?
Yes. So I think what's really important, and we touched upon that before, is that today you have little coding programs for girls here and there, and they're touching 10 or 15 people here. And I think that's great, but I think it should be mainstreamed into school curriculum. And we should see what you do, but everywhere and at a massive scale so that it can really change the future. And I think it's also important to give universal entrepreneurship education to all students because the workforce will change, and we will always have to recreate our own jobs. And so we will have to have the skills to be sort of the project managers of our own lives. And that's how coders are being taught today, but not other professions. And I think that getting more women into technology is so important. And the way I realized that, which was my awakening, was when I was at the Web Summit last November, and I saw this robot called Einstein, maybe you've seen it, and he spoke to Sophia, which is the other robot, and he called her babe. And somebody must have programmed that. So I think that we really have to get behind, and we have to be the ones also changing the artificial intelligence, getting our foot into technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, et cetera, so that when they come out and they're part of our mainstream world, we are part of that world. And I think that that's really, really hugely important.
Interesting. Well, I'll share one best practice that I'd like to share with the G7, and that's the parity certification that we've launched at Women in Governance, where we measure organizations from entry level all the way to the executive in 75 points in terms of what they do to support women to progress. It's proven we've had several tech companies actually go through this, and it's proven a very effective way to give it a positive twist, to encourage organizations to want to participate and get all the feedback and modify certain things so that next year they're even better ranked. So now we only have 8 minutes left, so we'll first ask Rhonda for her open question to the panel, and then we'll take a couple of questions from the room, so think of your questions. We only have 7 minutes left. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Thank you. What an insightful panel. For those of you that don't know in the room, I'm the chair of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. I'm the first female chair in history, 148 years of history. So we have a lot of work to do, but a lot of work's been done, and we really need to leverage what's been done and leapfrog ahead. So I'm working with our government on a skills proposal for Minister Baines right now. So I've been doing a lot of research on what other countries are doing, and I'm going to touch in a moment on Singapore. But from the last panel, there was a comment made, we need to change the world of opportunities for women. And in manufacturing and tech sectors, and I think in any sector, what I think that means is upskilling and lifelong learning. So we're talking about building this skills pipeline for the future world of work. And so there's a global talent competitive index, and Canada sits number 15. Singapore sits number 2. So Singapore introduced a program called, I think, Skills Future, where those dollars are in the hands of real people. Every single citizen of the country has those dollars. It's like an RRSP or an RESP, where the government puts money in, companies put money in, you put money in for upskilling. So my question to the panel is one of two things. For that talent pipeline of the future, where we don't necessarily have to have equal numbers of jobs in every field, but we want to be equally opportunistic, close the wage gap, all of these things. Either how do women deploy those dollars if the G7 were to adopt a program like this where citizens have control of these dollars to upskill and reskill? How do women deploy those dollars, or what's the commercial that governments of G7 countries would play to focus equity for women in upskilling and reskilling?
I can try to answer that. You know, like I've said, there is a skills gap. There is a big one, and we need to address it. And you know, it's an interesting question, because when I came to Canada, I came as an immigrant 20 years ago, and to me, this was the land of opportunity and equality. I didn't know about a glass ceiling. I'd never heard of it. I thought, you know, I'm in Canada, I can do anything I want. And so it was an interesting perspective, because I didn't have the hang-ups that a lot of us do. And so I went after what I wanted. And I think that the issues that might turn up with that is, where do women put those? If they need to feed their family, are they going to put that skill towards something that solves an immediate need as opposed to a long-term need? Right? So I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and I certainly don't have all the answers for that.
I'd like to sort of address that. So if you take your example where, okay, so the government is giving some vouchers or some money for people to upskill, let's take the example of truck drivers, right? Because that one's coming quick and fast. Well, so are all truck drivers going to be out of jobs? Well, the answer is no, right? Because truck drivers are good at driving, but they're also good at loading, checking, logistics, a lot. And so reskilling a truck driver, right, it's top of mind for everybody. And what will happen there is they're not, the autonomous part of the truck driver's job will become autonomous. The one that isn't good for him anyway, right, is going to become autonomous and will have less failures. But what the truck driver should be then doing is using tech to upskill the other parts, the logistics part, the safety part, the checking part, the quality control part. So I think what we want to not do is put a fear in people, oh, your job is going to get lost. It's useless to say that to them, right? What you want to say to them is, look, your job might get actually a little bit better, because the routine, the robotic part of your job, somebody's going to help you with, right? And then what do you think you do? Because, you know, you've been doing truck driving for 40 years. You know so much that there's no way I'll be able to put that into a robot to do. So what is it? Where is it? Where are those areas of human behavior? The gray part of our matter that can't be automated, what are those in each jobs that the humans can then, again, reskill for? And I think that's a really positive, and it's a really powerful way of presenting these vouchers or the upskilling efforts, because there's no fear in it. It's like almost like, hey, now you have this opportunity. And so why don't we look at it like that?
Thank you. So do we have a question in the room? Is there a mic? Is it Rhonda's mic? So pick someone. We only have 2 minutes left, so I'll ask you to be brief with your question.
Sure. I'm wondering if you could speak a bit to what role you see the media playing in helping facilitate these changes and encourage these, I guess, steps that need to be taken.
The role of media. Very good one. Somebody mentioned something earlier.
So I read one study that said 1/3 of entrepreneurs wouldn't have started their business if they didn't have a role model. And I think that most role models today are men, and that's also a factor that is being mainly played out also by the media, which is supporting that. So the media could have, quotas and could go in the other direction and changing the trend.
Anybody else wants to answer that one? Or
I got a microphone, so I'm going to ask a quick question. We've had a lot of discussions about high-level policy recommendations. My question to the panel is, what things can the people in this room do to help change culture? Really like actionable things we can ingrain into the way that we live our lives. Thank you.
I mean, that's a tough one, right? Everybody wants, like, what can I do now? And it's tough, but I think it's possible to do. So it really depends where you are. Are you in healthcare? Are you in education? Are you a technologist? What are you? Where is that intersection of tech with you, right, in your locale? And can you be more ingrained in it, maybe from a leadership point of view? So if you're a teacher, right, and you're teaching your kids all the time, and there is some tech there. Do you have bandwidth to go further in the tech world to make sure that the girls and the boys, right, are upskilled in that way? It's really specific, but I think the general answer is, where is that intersection of tech with me, and is there things that I can do? And are there ways that I can enhance or help with that? And the thing is, you live in Canada, and right now, Canada, because I live in Silicon Valley, I have a different perspective than the people who live here, is that Canada is seen as a very welcoming, diverse, and innovative country. That's what, at the moment, the perception is of Canada. And if you take that perception and sort of make it come true at an individual level, then I think you're on your way. But you already have that badge of honor. You know, there's not very many other countries that I can say that about. Certainly not many countries.
Well, I think this is a great question. If I may add, I'm glad. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to take any more questions because our time is up. But I'm delighted that this is the last question because it's essential. It first demonstrates the willingness of each person to do something because, yes, we all have the power to change things. And I think there's so much that is in the hands of women themselves. So we talk about the confidence gap. We talk about the fact that, you know, we don't get the promotions, we don't get the raises, but do we ask for them? We should at least start there. Start by defending ourselves, start by defending other women around us. You know, that hashtag amplify. So if women are not that great at, you know, talking about their accomplishments the way that men do, why don't you take that opportunity to talk, you know, introduce your friend and say, she's done this or that, because you know she's not going to say it. So these things are essential and a very, very easy thing to integrate tomorrow morning. And then there's the role of men and integrating them in the conversation, because as long as we only talk about this among each other, it's only half a conversation and only half a solution. And men, they actually want to be part of this. And there's a lot of research that demonstrates that they just don't know how. It's not that they're not interested in equality, far from that. They do understand, with all the research that we've been seeing around the positive impact on financial performance of an organization. Of course, some Harry and Dick want to have women around the table, but there are things that prevent them from doing it because they don't know where to start, they're afraid to do the wrong thing, etc. I think the conversation needs to be global altogether, and I'm really glad, and I see they've added a couple of minutes on the little screen here, so I'm guessing it's because we might take another question. So, bonus. So who has the mic? You will choose who the next person will be.
Hi. I was just wondering if in your work we've talked a lot about what our solutions are for the skills pipeline, but if you've heard from the girls and the young women who are coming up in that pipeline, what their perception of what they need or what barriers they're facing is.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, you know, I think with a lot of young people, working in really big companies is difficult because even though there is a perception that they want to be more agile, they want to be more innovative, they want to open more doors and allow different work opportunities, it is harder for big companies. And so I think a lot of young people are kind of leaving that and moving to small startups and smaller companies. And so really, I think corporations need to figure out how to create that agile workplace within the big organization in order to engage women and young people.
I was just going to say, I work across the country with universities, colleges, lots of people working in all, you know, educating themselves in different sectors, and almost every single youth person tells me, I do not feel equipped for the workplace of tomorrow. I don't feel that what we're learning here is reflective of what is needed in workplaces. It hasn't changed as the workplace has and as fast. And you know, I'm just bringing it back to mental health because that's my expertise, is 80% of mental health problems happen before 18. And if people are struggling in schools, 50% of kids in first year in Canada went to mental health services. So we need to change the skills that we are teaching people in school. We have to look upstream. And I think that's the only way to really prepare people for tomorrow.
Well, thank you very much. This is all the time that we had. A very warm applause. Bravo. To our panelists.